Omnibus is a production of iHeartRadio.
This is Jim, and
Receiving this message. We are Ken Jennings and John Roderick. We speak to you from our present, which we can only assume is your distant past, the turbulent time that was the early 21st century.
Fearing the great cataclysm that will surely befall our civilization, we began this monumental reference of strange and obscure human knowledge. These recordings represent our attempt to compile and preserve wonders and esoterica that would otherwise be lost.
So whether you're listening from an advanced civilization or have just reinvented the technology to decrypt our transmissions, this is our legacy to you.
This is our time capsule. This is the Omnibus.
You have accessed entry 1331.IS0816, certificate number 31310. Trapper Keepers.
Sorry.
I'm sorry.
Here you are.
Oh,
Say, what is that thing?
it's my trapper for me.
It sure is a lot neater than this.
That's because it traps my papers in so they won't fall out. And I've got a trapper folder for each subject.
That's pretty neat.
And the trapper keeper holds all my trappers. This flap even has a Velcro closure to keep everything inside.
Boy, I've got to get a trapper and get my act together.
If you do, I'll let you carry my books.
I like to think I know you pretty well. I mean, there are a lot of secrets you still have from me.
I'm full of secrets.
I don't know everything about what goes on over at Jennings' home.
I'm the Laura Palmer of this broadcast.
But I'm inclined to suspect that you, like me,
I do like you. That's correct.
well, yes, you do like me, but also, like me, you are somewhat of a stationary fetishist. Is that true? Do you crave colored pencils and little pencil cases and different notebooks and stuff? You know what I'm talking
I don't
about.
love the word crave, and I'm not.
Right.
I'm not sure it's a fetish.
Okay.
All right,
so-
I've never I don't know how excited I've ever been by a pencil sharpener.
Let's
but-
not split hairs. Do you want...
But I do love stationery.
Okay.
You are right.
I see it in your eyes. You don't like crave or fetish because those words get too close to the heart of how you feel about these
My
things.
very intense personal feelings.
You're like, no, it's not a fetish.
Last night, my daughter was telling me she wanted to try out like a Japanese brush pen that she had seen one of her friends using.
yeah.
And I've got I got a bunch of those on my desk. And I got one out and we just played with this brush pen for hours because you can get a beautiful line out of it.
She's very artistic.
She loves, I can just hang out in an art supply store with her for an hour. And that was something I loved in my childhood, just looking at different colors of colored pencils and weird markers and weird erasable markers and smelly markers.
And you are, again, not to make every show about how you're slightly younger than me, but there was a kind of stationary revolution somewhere along the way, and you were living in Asia, which was, I like to think, the font, and I mean the fountain, from whence this great revolution in smelly markers arose into the world.
I think it was ground zero. I mean, to this day, if you go to any Japanese department store, there will be a whole floor of stationery. And if you want 150 erasers shaped like different kinds of sushi or weird, every combination of Hello Kitty characters on a different little notepad or...
My daughter just brought 2 days ago a handful of little erasers shaped like sushi to me and said, "What kinds of sushi are these?" And I was like, "Well, which one is this?" And she was like, "That's clearly salmon. These are fish eggs. But what's this?" And I was like, "It's maguro." She was like, "Ah."
Wow. Where did she get her sushi stationery?
No idea. But I mean, that's the thing about the crazy stationery, right? It comes in through, it's like sugar ants. It comes into our lives through little holes.
It usually goes out of mine through little holes, but that's mostly just my kids knowing where I keep my stapler pencils and Japanese brush pens, and then I never see them again. I think East Asia, it was ground zero for that kind of thing, because when I was I lived there in the early 80s, And there's so much you could not buy. Couldn't buy American groceries, couldn't buy any of the American toy brands I liked. It was always weird Mazinga Z robots and stuff. But what you could get that was many times better than anything in a I was about to say Target. There was no Target. Anything in a Kmart was stationery, like these amazing pencil boxes. I don't know if they were Japanese imports or if this had already started to spread to Korea and Taiwan and the other emerging markets. But pencil boxes that would have a bunch of secret compartments and a series of buttons. You press button 5 and the pencil sharpener pops out. You press button 6, the little hidden tray comes out. It was a transformer in pencil box form. And it didn't turn into a robot. It turned into an open pencil box.
Right.
But yes, and I loved all this stuff. My school had a little bookstore. My school in Korea had a little bookstore where you couldn't buy books, but you could buy, weird glue and scissors and notebooks. And, every year I had to have, one of these and 4 of these and 6. They had a list that got sent home, and I would dutifully buy all my stuff, and I would just love it. To this day, I love school and art supplies.
Did you try to learn calligraphy? Was that a component of you have these little paintbrushes? Did you use those to draw, or did you try and write with them?
I love typography, but I've never taken a calligraphy class. I probably should, because when you watch people do it on YouTube, I could watch YouTube calligraphy videos all day.
But there's that whole tradition in Japan where you just draw one character for 25 years, become the master of drawing one character.
Yeah, I'm going to do that in English. I'm going to
letter B.
I'm
lowercase
thinking,
b.
Yeah, I'm thinking lowercase b. I'm going to get really good at lowercase b, and I'll be the guy you call in for that.
Well, let me tell you what it was like here in darkest America during your halcyon days in Korea with all your scented erasers.
This is what I want to know, because I would come home in the summers for back to school shopping at Mervyn's, and you'd see all the kids in there getting their cool gear.
Yeah.
And I feel like I was missing the whole thing.
Well, in the 1970s, my experience at least, my dad was a lawyer and my mom was a computer programmer. So the stationery that I had were either yellow legal pads.
That's what I had from my lawyer dad. Yellow legal pads everywhere.
Just in profusion. And they all had already chicken scratch notes taking up the first half of them. So I only had the back half of 1,000 yellow legal pads.
Most of my drawing paper was like invoices for my grandpa's pet food sales.
Well, what my mom had was the giant reams of dot matrix printer paper that was it was connected, right? It was all still just a huge single. It was like the manuscript of On the Road, except it wasn't toilet paper.
It had the perforations on the side, right?
Yeah.
Wow, that takes me back.
And perforations between sheets, and the sheets were had green and white striped lines on them. So you could, at a glance kind of know where you were.
By the time we got our first dot matrix printer, it did not have the adding machine lines. So I kind of missed out on that. But what a bummer if you're trying to draw. And everything's lined and colored.
Yeah, you can sort of imagine them away. But we also had punch cards. The unfortunate thing about at my house, Mom would bring home big bins of punch cards, but they all had punches taken out of them.
Could you use them to reverse engineer military secrets?
Yeah, for sure. Each one contained all the secrets.
If these are in the right order, I can build a parabolic mic or a laser for shooting the San Andreas Fault or something.
But most of our pens were just pens. I think my dad had some good pens, but no one in my family had nib pens.
Yeah.
And then there were Bic pens.
Cheap Bic pens.
And 3-ring binders that you might find in a law office. A lot of stuff, like everything in my early childhood, it was just cast off stuff from the military-industrial complex. I think that we produced a lot of 3-ring binders in the process of putting a man on the moon. And then those just went out. They were disseminated out through the culture.
Every American lined up, in early 1970 and received his or her 8 3-ring binders.
Yeah, here's a compass. Here are your white 3-ring binders.
As a left-handed person, by the way, 3-ring binders are a kind of tyranny.
Because they are oriented for a handedness?
Yeah, if you're writing on paper while it's in the binder, that's definitely an option for right-handed people, pulling their hand away from the rings.
Of course.
If you're left-handed, your hand sits right on the rings.
Oh, that's awful.
Yeah, so you have to snap it out right and then put it back in. And really, this is the kind of persecution I've had to face my entire life. It's really shaped who I am.
All the things we right-handers don't even think about.
Your right privilege is starting to piss me off.
And even if you flip it upside down, it's still the same problem. It doesn't change. My mom is left-handed and her handwriting is slanted the complete opposite way of, it's like reverse slanted.
It's up and to the left
Yeah.
in Dealey Plaza parlance.
And I find it the most beautiful handwriting. It's my mom's, right? So I think it is so perfect to me. But then when I compare it to other people's handwriting, I realize how crazy it looks.
What's the opposite of italics? That's what you're doing, Mom.
And she always, she always has the book arranged kind of side or, any kind of page.
Does she do the thing where her hand is almost twisted 90 degrees on itself?
No, she doesn't do that. Okay. She actually moves the book so that she can write her style, however it goes.
I learned in my era, we had to learn to conform. We had to kind of integrate ourselves.
They would beat you, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
I didn't use my right hand, but I had to learn to tilt my letters the correct way, hold my pen like a right-handed person.
Yeah.
I did have a series of hefty lefty notebooks, which really it's for the robust, the hardy left-handed gentleman. I guess
you're talking about my dating life now.
Seeking
hefty lefties
seeks companionship. It was a spiral bound notebook. Its only distinguishing fact was, I think on the inside of the cover, it had a list of facts about left-handed people and maybe famous left-handers, because that would cheer you up to be like
facts about them.
Whoa, Aristotle was left-handed. Well,
I
just
think
facts
the
about
number
left-handedness
one,
in
number
general.
one fact would be that they are left-handed. And what's the second fact?
Spoilers. But the gimmick was that the rings were on the top.
Oh, sure.
So it was, they sell notebooks like this for normals too.
Yeah.
But the hefty lefty was, because the spiral binding would not gouge up the side of your left hand while you wrote, which regular notebooks would do.
Well, in the case of my own personal story, which is what all of these episodes really are about.
With brief asides in which I am permitted to talk about myself. Let's get back to your narrative, John.
I was fortunate enough to, in a lot of ways, I think this is fairly common. You feel sometimes like you were born too late because the things that the generation right before you had seemed like more akin to how you imagine yourself, or born too early because you didn't get all these new fangled gadgets. I was born at exactly the right moment to experience the stationery and school supplies revolution that happened in the very late 70s, early 80s, because I was in 6th grade in 1979, 1980.
Is that the epicenter of this?
And that was the year, 6th grade is kind of your last year of elementary school, or at least in Alaska. Last year of elementary school, where you have a desk that has a top that opens, you can keep your school supplies in it.
There's no locker.
You don't have to move from class to class. This is your last time where you're in the safety of the nest.
It was 6th grade was my last time to have one of those metal lunchboxes as well.
Your lunchbox goes away. All of your I used to have on all my pencils a little triangular shaped piece of rubber that tried to keep my fingers positioned.
Is that what those are for? What are those for?
Well, I gripped my pencils in a fist, and
you don't still do that, do you?
No, it was like it drove teachers crazy. They wanted me to hold my pencil a certain way. I don't remember. This was agonizing for all of us for years. People would come and take the pencil out of my hand and forcibly shape my fingers the way they wanted me to hold it. And it felt like I was holding some kind of, I don't want to have this be about my persecution, because of course left-handed people had it a lot worse. But people like me that just wanted to hold a pencil in a fist.
Fist Neanderthal people.
They put these little things on it, which were supposed to make it hard for you to hold it.
Oh,
It was like this kind of punishment.
It's like the thing you do to a baby's binky to make it less fun to suck on. So
Aversion therapy. You put a little metal thing in some kid's mouth.
Or cayenne.
But all it did was just make it uncomfortable for me to hold it in a fist, which I continue to do.
You're a fist pencil masochist.
A fistulan.
When did you convert?
Oh, well, how do I guess I hold is this how you're supposed to hold a pencil?
No, that's awful.
How is this wrong?
I don't want to see that. Stop doing that.
Do you do this?
Stop doing that. Yes, that's how everyone does it.
This is not, no.
Whoa, no, stop it.
You do this. This feels very secure to me. It's sort of a little bit of a
This
fist.
is Daniel Day-Lewis as a handicapped character in a movie.
This is what Bob Dole does, right? He holds a pencil so nobody shakes his hand.
That's exactly right.
Well, this is how I hold a pencil, and it still would drive an elementary school teacher crazy. But in in the fall of 1980, I went to 7th grade, and I had a locker, and I had 6 classes. And it was overwhelming for me as somebody who could never even keep a pencil, right? I mean, I was like the ultimate pencil loser. And maybe it was because they all had this gummy thing on them and I intentionally lost them. But suddenly I had a locker and I had 6 books and 6 notebooks and all this responsibility.
Yeah, they don't ramp up to it. It's
No.
like one day you have 1 class in one room and the next day you have 6 or 7 of everything.
Of everything, and you have to have, where's your book? Where's your folder? Where's yesterday's assignment? Where's tomorrow's assignment? And at this moment in my life, in Anchorage, was introduced that great revolution, the Trapper Keeper.
It was introduced in Anchorage?
Well, no.
Did you guys get them first?
In fact,
it came down from the North Pole.
In fact, it was introduced in Wichita, Kansas, but we'll get there in a moment. Did you have Trapper Keepers in Korea? 1980, you would have been there, right?
No, we moved in 81. But
81.
no, I never owned a Trapper Keeper. I saw them, but I feel like I somehow missed their ebbs and flows in the time when it would have been perfect for me to have one.
Yes, right. There was a window, a Trapper Keeper window. Let me explain how Trapper Keepers arrived on the scene.
Where do Trapper Keepers come from, John?
Well, a man by the name of E. Bryant Crutchfield worked for the Mead Corporation, which was even then a giant stationery corporation that also branched out had its tendrils in many different walks of sort of media production.
Okay.
They were a large enough company that they had a director of new ventures, and that was the selfsame E. Bryant Crutchfield, whose job was to go out and come up with new trends in media.
That's pretty fancy for a stationery company,
right?
To have a director of new ventures. That seems very modern information age.
It does, and especially then when it felt like what you got was pens and paper.
We have yellow pencils and Bic pens, and that's the total amount of America's stationery output.
Well, Bryant Crutchfield was not content with this, and he was out doing studies. He was even going so far as to initiate studies. He had a study in conjunction with someone at Harvard where he realized that during this period in the 70s and 80s, classroom size was getting larger. More and more kids were going to be in schools, and there was a growing, what would you call it? And we see it to this day, like students were getting more and more books, more and more projects. It wasn't the simple times anymore.
We're starting to pile on kids because of all these competing educational theories coming and going and overlapping.
That's right. You've got new math, you've got new old math, you've got the old new math. You're going to need a book for each one of those things. And he realized that there was a need, there was an opportunity in the market for a system for students where you, rather than carrying 6 notebooks from home to school and going back to your locker 6 times during the day to trade notebooks, that there was an opportunity for a consolidated kind of notebook system where you would have 6 notebooks within a single folder based on a 3-ring binder model, be able to take folders in, take them out.
Modular.
It's modular, exactly. Thank you.
This seems like some kind of, space race side effect of, efficiency as well. Like, what's the right way to be a student? And it seems like that would appeal to a certain kind of kid who likes to have the gleaming new notebook with their name in the upper right, but also to parents, right? Like this stationary school supply boom may coincide with the beginning of the super attentive hovering parent who's always concerned, the boomers having their kids and wanting to make sure they do everything right and not be the kind of absent, out of touch parents they were delivered, right?
Well, the great thing about this kind of system is that it appeals to the hyper-organized, but it also, maybe even more so, appeals to the tragically and chronically disorganized.
In what way?
Well, that it offers a solution. Because the chronically disorganized always feel like, if I just had if I could just keep this all together, and the disorganization.
Anybody with a kid realizes they are just incapable of keeping track of 2 things at once.
Right. And it feels like a problem. It clearly is a problem of the mind, but it often feels like a problem of the manifestation, or it feels like a problem of why can't I keep this all together? It's all in such a jumble. If you go on the internet, 98% of all efficiency workflow websites, you can tell just from reading them that the people writing them are chronically disorganized people who are pretending, right, to be using this new technology.
Right. It's a workaround or a coping mechanism.
Right.
You know, it's the same thing you do when your memory starts to go and you start to outsource parts of your brain to little pads, little scraps of paper, little kind of delaying strategies so people don't notice you're struggling to remember a name or a place. It's exactly like that. It's a life hack.
Well, so Brian Crutchfield was working on this sort of modular folder system for a long time. He first conceived of the problem, I guess, in the early 70s. And by the mid 70s, he was kind of putting this system together in his head. Now, this is incredible to me that the Mead Corporation could employ a director of new ventures who had the leeway to spend a decade just sitting ruminating, like twirling a pencil in his fingers behind his big desk, thinking up this new modular folder system. But at one point he was talking to a sales rep from the Western region, Mead's Western sales rep, talking about this modular folder system that he was working on. And the rep suggested that he take a look at a Peachy folder. Now, are you familiar with the Peachy folder?
What is a Peachy folder?
Well, this is hilarious to me.
I'm looking now.
This is hilarious because in my world, which is the Western United States, the Peachy folder was absolutely a ubiquitous school supply. It's a sort of heavy cardstock, peach-colored folder. It has no rings inside of it. It's just basically like it has pockets on either side that you slip pieces of paper into as a kind of clamshell organizer. It's only slightly bigger than a piece of notebook paper. And it's peach-colored, and it has some sort of clip art drawings of students
I'm looking at one
doing
now.
sports.
I don't like how it's called P-chi.
P-E-E hyphen
I don't think you want to
C.
start your yellow folder with the word P.
Well, Peachies, I mean, that's wonderful that you would say that. Peachies were maybe the most modified, the most hilariously hacked of all school supplies.
How do you hack a notebook?
Well, these notebooks had these drawings of sports people on them. And the most famous one...
I'm looking at it now. It's a beautiful mid-century kind of illustration of different school sports teams. Right?
Yeah, there were several different iterations of this, of the Peachy folder, but the most famous one was designed in 1964 by a graphic artist by the name of Francis Golden, who many years later, in the course of an interview, was asked about his drawings for Peachy, which for many students became like, I mean, they're as familiar to us as Mickey Mouse, right? I mean, just things we saw every single day. He had to be reminded that he had drawn them.
For him, it was just like a weekend job.
Yeah, in the late 80s. And like he was a famous illustrator. Most of his work was in watercolor, and this was just a commercial art thing that he did, over the course of a weekend. But the famous sports figures are, on the front of the Peachy folder, there is a batter who's just about to hit a fastball. You can see he's winding up his front leg is off the ground. He's ready to knock this ball out of the park, although the ball does not appear. And then below him, there are two basketball players, one of them making a jump shot and the other guy jumping up to cover him.
The guy jumping is in a weird position. The defender doesn't have his arms all that high.
No.
And he appears to have kind of bounced off the floor with both hands or some kind of a jetpack.
What's interesting about Francis Golden's illustrations is that he does not appear to have ever seen real human beings doing sports or in motion.
He has never seen sports before.
Because both of the basketball players seem like they are on a trampoline. This is not how basketball looks. The guy shooting the basket, maybe if the basket was behind him, he could be doing kind of a Space Jam, like wherever the basket is, this is not how you do a jump shot. And that I have no idea how that defender is flying through the air. And then there's a third basketball player standing in the background, basically like,
hey, what's up, you guys?
Yeah, with his hands on his hips.
He's in the distance, like something's going to happen.
And then at the bottom, there's a woman in skis, in ski gear, but she's on the chairlift. So she's just riding the chair. So not really super
not an
sport.
action.
Yeah, not like an action shot, but there are some skiers on the ground beneath her.
Are you looking at the other side now that has the football players?
So the back of it, at the top, there's a girl who's just hit a big tennis shot. And like we see so often in a tennis game, she's just jumping vertically.
She's floating in the air after hitting the shot.
So she jumped way up high, straight up and down like a volleyball player, hit the tennis shot and is now falling with her skirt kind of flooping up.
Yeah, it's almost a ballet maneuver. She's got these kind of long legs doing a jeté or something.
And she's really happy. And then in the middle, there are two football players. This is maybe the most confusing illustration. There's a football player lying on the ground and another one on top of him as though tackling.
But he has the ball.
But the guy on top has the ball.
The ball carrier, number 4 here, appears to have tackled number 10, a player who's just lying on the ground.
Yeah, number 10 even seems like he might be dead. Number 4 is, I don't know what he's doing. He looks like maybe he's getting up from having tackled him, although he's the ball carrier. You can't see either of their faces. It's very confusing what's happening. And then at the bottom, there are 3 runners in the midst of a relay race.
Oh, yeah, I see the baton.
They're carrying batons, and they are really, really running. Super fast. Super fast running.
They're at like a 45-degree angle with the ground because of the tight turn they're making. They're like the Roadrunner.
So Peaches, even before I went into 7th grade, I knew all about Peaches because Peaches were synonymous with high school. If you were a high schooler, you had a Peachy. And I remember older kids having Peaches. These were the real symbols of having graduated to a world where you needed a folder to hold all your papers. And I think I had Peaches even in 6th grade, they were a sign that I was moving forward.
Yeah, elementary schoolers don't have papers.
No.
You get something back and you take it home and mom puts it on the fridge.
Yeah, right. You have it, or you keep them in your desk in a big mess.
Not a lot of filing in 4th grade.
But Peaches were, I think, also their secondary role, and maybe their more important role, was that they were places to doodle. And those 6 vignettes were so heavily modified. I mean, they were an opportunity to be creative. We all had Peaches, so we all had the same starting point. And depending on how creative you were, how obscene you wanted to be, you could make these...
Oh, you make the figures do awful things.
Make the figures do awful things. You could dress them in different clothes. You could give them thought balloons. You could add other elements. You know, the baseball player could be about to hit almost anything you could draw.
Or anyone.
And you could replace the batons in the runners with beer bottles or whatever. You know, there were a million different iterations of this. But one of the great features of Peaches was that rather than have pockets on the inside that were just at the bottom of the folder, they had pockets on the sides. So you slipped paper in, and then once you closed the folder, no matter how you shook it, the papers couldn't fall out.
Genius.
Whereas older folders, if with a pocket at the bottom or a different style, if you turned them upside down, the papers would immediately fall out.
And with a backpack or a locker, stuff does just not stay upright. Those are not designed for
Right.
file folders.
But for people on the West Coast, these Peaches were ubiquitous. And it was only many, many years later that I realized that this was like a Hellman's Best Foods mayonnaise schism.
There was a line east of which nobody knew about Peaches?
East of the Rocky Mountains, no one ever heard of them. And so Peaches were the product of a company called Western Tablet. And they had worked and worked and worked to introduce Peaches to the East Coast, and they just never caught on. It's one of the great sort of quizzical things about American culture and about stationery in particular. Why would they be so popular on the West Coast and invisible elsewhere?
That is how high school works, though. Somebody has something and everybody else has to do that stupid thing for the rest of the year. Why does Western Tablet and Stationery Company have their headquarters in Kalamazoo, Michigan? That's not the West. No,
well, that's the thing. And actually Western Tablet has a very famous building in Missouri. They were a large company. It's a building on the National Historic Register that's now abandoned, and you could probably buy it for $2,500.
It's like they knew that their destiny was bringing Peaches to the West, even though they hailed from...
And Kalamazoo was the West if we're talking about during the French and Indian Wars.
That's true.
But E. Bryant Crutchfield, being introduced to the concept of the Peachy folder by his Western sales rep, realized the ingenuity of these side pockets, and he integrated that notion into his now growing concept of what this system was going to be. And he eventually, in collaborating with other people at Mead, came up with the idea that these folders, which were basically rip-offs, just pure rip-offs of Peaches, including Peaches were famous for having tables printed on the inside.
Oh, yeah, I remember that. Where
Multiplication tables and
pecks and bushels and
yeah,
stuff.
and how to, convert metric to imperial or
Right.
whatever.
But not famous left-handed people.
No famous left-handed
It's
people.
just list famous right-handed people.
It's just the
should be everyone.
accomplishments of famous right-handed people, like multiplication.
Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves. Euclid dreamed up geometry.
But then some left-handed people also did some things, less significant things.
Probably.
Yeah, maybe they're mostly artists.
I was just noticing in the Avengers movie, Scarlett Johansson signed stuff with her left hand.
One more reason to love Scarlett Johansson.
And in the credits, when the actors are signing their names, spoilers, you can see that she's left-handed. All the letters go from upper left to lower right, which is very hard to do for a right-handed hand.
Adorbs. Anyway, so in stealing the whole concept of Peaches, he took the drawings away.
Right. It turns out the special hotness here is not the oddly drawn basketball players. It's the side pockets.
But his idea was that these folders then would have punches for 3-ring binders, and the trappers, which is what this is the name he coined for his little folders because they trapped your papers. The trappers would be kept in a binder, essentially a glorified 3-ring binder with a flap that he called the Trapper Keeper.
I don't think I ever understood the name until now.
Yep.
I thought it was just a trapper keeper in the sense of it was saying the same thing twice, 2 words that meant the same thing, like taxi cab or pussycat. I didn't realize.
Right, shrimp scampi.
For example. Jumbo shrimp. Oh, wait, that's an oxymoron. The trappers are the folders.
Yes.
And the keeper keeps the... I always thought the name was dumb. I'd never liked the name.
Well, do you like it better now?
A little. It does still seem like it's a 17th century French voyageur or something. Like
Trapper Keeper.
it makes me think of like beaver trapping and fur trapping.
Well, if you think about a keeper as being a goalie,
That's true.
and a trapper being like a fur trapper.
So it's a soccer team where
Yeah,
everyone's a fur trapper.
it's a fur trapper
bearded
goalie.
fur trapper.
Yeah.
But the goalie maybe is not.
None of this is useful, no. But there is a distinction between the trappers and then the system within the trappers.
Could you buy the trappers separately?
No. Oh, yes, you could buy trappers separately. You could not buy a trapper keeper without trappers.
If you bought the keeper, it would come with a set of trappers.
Yeah, but you can buy extra trappers and add them to your trapper.
And the keeper would come with whatever, a day's worth of classes, or it would come with 5 or 6 or 7
I think the original
trappers
trapper
already in it.
keeper came with 3 folders, but you could add, it was, modular, right? You could add.
To match
trappers.
the modern lifestyle.
That's right. Because, at first you have 3 classes, then you have 6, then you have 16 classes, then you have 32 classes.
Yeah, they just double every year.
That's what college is all about, kids. If you're listening to this program and you're not in college yet, you will be taking 32 classes by the time you're a junior in college.
It just doubles every year.
Yeah.
And when you graduate, when it crosses 4,096.
What was great about the Mead Company in the late 1970s was, unlike today, if you're like, let's say you have an app or a startup that's going to be disrupting the media environment of 2019, you're going to rush your product rush it just right through beta and get it online within maybe even hours of conceiving of it.
Yeah, you got to be first to market.
That's right. Whereas at this point in time, Crutchfield has now spent, 6 years conceiving of the Trapper Keeper? And he decides, rather than go crazy and just put it for sale, he's going to test market it. And he takes it to Wichita, Kansas. They pick Wichita. I think this happens fairly often. Somewhere like Wichita is deemed the most American place, or a market that will sort of stand. It's kind of like the Iowa caucuses, right?
It's a geographical accident that because it's in the middle, people think it must be representative somehow.
This is the normalest place. And they introduced Trapper Keepers into Wichita, and I can only imagine their trepidation. Like, well, let's hope this works, boys. They made a television commercial and flooded Wichita with Trapper Keepers in 1978, during school shopping season in the late summer of 78. And much to their surprise and delight, Trapper Keepers went viral. Absolutely everyone in Wichita needed a Trapper Keeper.
Once the school once the school ecosystem decides you've got to have the thing, then everyone just has to get the thing, and you're kicking yourself for not realizing earlier that you needed the thing.
That's right. I mean, how could I ever have lived without a Trapper Keeper, said the students in Wichita in 1978.
And did they have the eye-catching designs? Because I remember Trapper Keepers not for their functionality, but as a lifestyle accessory.
Well, now that came later. In its first iteration, they just were primary colors. And in fact, the Trappers were red, blue, and green. And the Trapper Keepers were also, you could pick red, blue, or green.
The three things that all American high schoolers love.
Yeah.
Red, blue, and green.
First Trapper Keeper was red, and I had red, blue, and green folders in it. Later on, as we'll see, Trapper Keepers became an opportunity for people to be fancy. But they were an immediate hit, and then they were introduced nationwide. And by 1980, when I first encountered a Trapper Keeper, they were absolutely de rigueur. Like, if you did not have a Trapper Keeper, something was going terribly wrong in your family. Your priorities were all mixed up. You could not...
Imagine the principal calling you, is everything okay at home?
You absolutely could not show up to class with old legal pads, which was my family's instinct. But fortunately, they weren't expensive. A Trapper Keeper was under $5. And the Trappers themselves were... 50 cents.
Are the Trappers paper or like cardstock or plastic?
They're cardstock. They're almost exactly Peaches, but slightly, they were the cardstock, but with a slightly glossier finish. But Trapper Keepers, unlike most stationary fads, unlike most school fads, they never really had a blowback. Kids did not do what they normally do, which is 2 years later reject entirely Trapper Keepers.
That's baby stuff.
Right. You still have a Trapper Keeper. Nothing came along that bested Trapper Keepers for this sort of combination of functionality and
it really was
compact
the
style.
Killer app.
And you could add a little pouch to keep your calligraphy pens and your erasers. And I no longer had an excuse for constantly needing to borrow pencils from my friends because I had a Trapper Keeper.
I never had a pencil. I needed a Trapper Keeper.
This was also when the first erasable pens came out. We should maybe talk about that on a future.
Erasable pens.
Yeah, erasable pens.
I find the logo of the Trapper Keeper the most iconic thing in my mind, even though I never had one. Those I don't know what that font is, but the rounded 80s letters with the kind of pseudo sci-fi breaks in the round parts. So it kind of looks like the Apple II logo or something. It's very much. And there were TV commercials. Do you remember that? I remember seeing an ad where at the end they would say, made by Mead, of course.
Yeah.
Which I thought was very egotistical. Made by Mead, of course.
Of course.
Who do you think you are?
Of course. Who else?
Look for the record with me on the cover.
What was interesting was that, as you mentioned a second ago, Trapper Keepers they started to add graphic elements to them very early. The first ones were just these primary colors. But then I think, in fact, E. Bryant Crutchfield took a few of his vacation photos. Like, here's a picture of a waterfall. Here's a picture of a lighthouse I took.
Here's the wife.
And they blew them up and put them on the outside of these Trapper Keepers. So you could pick the waterfall one. There were only 3 of them, right? And maybe there was
if he had just taken a better vacation.
Yeah, right. It was like an old barn.
Just gone to Carlsbad Caverns or something.
But you could, because that plastic on the outside, it was open at least enough that you could put your own picture in there.
Yeah, there was like a Mylar sheath that went around whatever the plastic that the backing was made out of. The same way a DVD case is today. So you could actually put stuff between the plastic and the transparent covering, right?
Right. And so Mead figured out, kids are doing this. This is something we should just get on top of.
We need to profiteer from kids drawing the cool S.
Right. You don't want to have the peachy thing where people are just putting on the tennis player. You want to do that on your own. And so they started to initiate, more and more designs that were coming from the home company, right? And so you'd have a couple of cute puppies. You might have a skateboarder doing a kind of trick.
Horses for the girls, sports cars for the boys.
That's right. And a Lamborghini, inevitably a Lamborghini. But
Testarossa, wasn't that the 80s sports car of
sure was
of little boys' dreams because it sounds like testosterone?
But in the mid to late 80s, they hired a young graphic artist by the name of Lisa Frank, who had made a little empire for herself at the, ripe old age of 24, designing stickers, because this was also part of this stationery revolution was every manner of little sticker and little.
I remember the sticker boom.
Yeah.
I think it was mostly for girls, but I didn't know. So I was like, I've got to have a sticker collection. And it was very seductive. There was like a store at the mall that would just sell stickers. And the thing had 100 walls of little rolls, and you could get the little stars or the little glittery dolphins or whatever it was. Oh, I'm looking at Lisa Frank's art now, and yeah, I'm right back in the sticker store.
Yeah, well, and this was also a time, I think, when teachers were, at least for me, I remember the first time a teacher gave me a sticker as a prize for having done a good job, and feeling like she may as well have given me a gold doubloon, like a sticker. And this wasn't just like a gold star. I remember my first gold star too, but the first time it was a sticker that said like, good job, and there was an alligator. It was so exciting, and it scratches some itch in kids.
Yeah, teachers can create their own little economies where everyone's like, oh, you got the alligator? I haven't got the alligator yet.
You got the alligator. So Lisa Frank, famous for drawing not just alligators, but Lisa Frank's drawings, if you look at them, are almost quintessentially the 80s. They communicate that kind of big-eyed, rainbow-drenched unicorn cuteness.
Rainbows, Pegasuses. The palette is not quite like Miami Vice pastels, but it's also not quite neon.
It's really ramped up colors.
Yeah,
though.
it's kind of candy-colored Technicolor Sour Patch Kids kind of a world.
Yeah.
With lots of airbrushed, shiny highlights on everything, on every little tiger cub's eyes or dolphin's heart-shaped bubbles.
And somehow
it's aggressively cute.
It's aggressively cute, and somehow this Lisa Frank tie-in, or Lisa Frank as the graphic artist for Mead, or for Trapper Keepers in particular. Trapper Keepers continued to expand in popularity to the point that they were selling $100 million worth of Trapper Keepers a year. And it wasn't just the graphic elements that kept changing. They made little modifications. They'd give it a different snap. After a while, it was they put Velcro on it, because Velcro, of course, Velcro needed to be on everything.
I think by the time I saw them, they were Velcro. I don't know if I ever saw a snap one.
The first one I had a snap.
I do remember kids being so excited about their Velcro shoes, like, look at this, no more laces. This is the future. And now, of course, it's just shorthand for somebody who's too old to tie their shoes, or it's kind of a short bus accessory.
Well, and when Velcro fell out of stock, it's astonishing to me that for 40 years, has it been 40 years? Yeah, 40 years. Trapper Keepers have more or less not changed their design at all, have never fallen out of fashion, and yet can somehow make these tiny little changes like, oh, now we have Velcro. Now we don't have Velcro. Like, they're always right ahead. Just as soon as a kid would be like, Velcro on your folder, they go back to snaps or to magnets.
So Trapper Keeper's still around.
Still enormously successful. As recently as 2014, Trapper Keeper introduced the Snapper Trapper.
The Snapper Trapper?
The Snapper Trapper is a trapper, but rather than having to open and close your 3-ring binder.
What a hassle that is.
I know. It has a little, the little 3-ring portion of your trapper can just sort of snap into the 3-ring binder component. So all indicating that Mead continues to evolve and have the Trapper Keeper component system keep up with the times. They know kids today don't have time to be opening 3-ring binders when they could just snap them in and out.
Lisa Frank is still alive. She still operates her famous art style out of a workshop in Tucson, but I guess she's famously reclusive.
Yes.
There hasn't been a picture published of her in decades, and when people interview her, they agree to obscure her face. She's a figure of mystery. Maybe she's actually a unicorn.
Or in a relationship with a unicorn, and she doesn't want people to know. The Mead Company grew and grew and grew and became one of those American corporations that kept buying and selling other media companies.
Oh, that's funny. Like, I would think they were the kind of company that eventually just gets bought. They get bought by Target or 3M or something. But they're now their own corporate giant.
They're their own thing. They kept, every time another company came up with something interesting, they would buy them. They bought the Big Chief Tablet Company. They bought a bunch of little, everybody that made paper or did any kind of thing like this got bought by Mead. Mead ended up now, The parent company is called Mead West Vaco, which is all one word.
Because they probably bought Western Vaco and something company.
Right. So Mead West Vaco is like a S&P 500 company.
Wow.
And maybe you would know them best as having developed LexisNexis, the legal research company.
Mead developed Trapper Keepers and LexisNexis.
LexisNexis, which they recently sold for like $1.5 billion.
I could just imagine E. Bryant Crutchfield or whatever it is sitting in his office for 10 years being like, I need a system for law students to find case law.
Well, that's exactly it.
Does it have a unicorn on it? I don't know yet. I need a few more years. And that concludes Trapper Keepers. Entry 1331.IS0816, certificate number 31310, in the omnibus. Now, futurelings, we have no idea what kind of stationery will exist in your era. Presumably, whatever ends our civilization will have returned our digital, app-based economy to a simpler, airbrushed unicorn stationery-based one, in which all of your doings are recorded on perforated green and white striped dot matrix printer paper. So social media doesn't exist for you.
No, you're all telepathic.
No, they just write things down on dot matrix printer paper and they'll make 15 copies of it and hand it to all their coral polyp friends.
Well, or run it through the machine and have it turn into punch cards and then...
That's right.
Yeah. Just keep them in order. Don't drop the box.
But we tried to save time with social media. It was a huge mistake.
Ugh.
Worst thing we ever did.
So sorry.
But in our era, the peak of social media mania, we were at Omnibus Project on multiple platforms. I was at Ken Jennings on Twitter. John was at John Roderick on Twitter.
Getting yelled at and called
Instagram.
a boomer. Called a boomer all the time on Twitter now.
You do?
Yeah, because anybody that's younger than...
Aren't you arguably a boomer?
No. I am... when they first came up with Generation X, I was at the young side of what they were describing as Generation X.
Oh yeah, 68, right?
68. I was young Generation X, and now I'm firmly in the middle of Generation X. I am nothing. I have spent my life at war with the baby boom.
In 5 years, kids are going to be asking you what you did in
the war.
In Korean War. Yeah,
I know. And so anytime I say something even slightly like not Marxist on the internet, some handful of kids will be like, boomer. I'm like, I agree that is an insult.
Unlike
just
you,
not directed at me.
Unlike you, I have met a baby boomer. There was one bright spot on this terrible, terrible garbage heap of humanity, which was the Futurelings Facebook group, in which someone has accused me of not knowing the movie What's Up, Doc? And I am very angry.
Yes.
Because I am
We have both watched that Barbra Streisand vehicle many times.
I feel like we talked about it on the show. My wife and I would not be together if not for the movie What's Up, Doc? Fun story.
Is that right?
Yes.
At the very chaste little after school soda fountain party that you guys met at.
Archie and Moose and Midge were all there.
She rolled up on her roller skates and you were like, want to watch this Barbra Streisand movie at the local library?
They were having a Barbra Streisand film festival. Wait, this is turning into more of like a gay pickup. I think I may have said this on the show before. She said one line from What's Up, Doc? And I said the next line.
Hello.
And
love
it was
at
like,
first
love at first
sight.
sight. Isn't that crazy? So yeah, just for the record, Futurelings, I know What's Up, Doc? Don't come at me. I'm a boomer.
The only two kids at BYU that had ever even seen a Barbra Streisand movie.
I bet a lot of those kids were growing up in heavy VHS homes with lots of their parents' 70s classics in heavy rotation.
Yeah, I suppose
I'm sure there are a lot of those kids that could quote every line of Saturday Night Fever.
It's a mad world.
Exactly. It's a mad. That's very on the nose. A couple of my Mormon friends were very into those 60s kind of, those magnificent men and their flying machines. Right. The Great Race. I don't know why that was it. We should do that genre of movie.
Oh, that's a wonderful genre. I mean, just the posters alone.
Yes. 60s, not very famous movie stars in a series of odd
things about like dirigibles.
Odd vehicles, yeah. And it's puzzling. They weren't even big stars. I mean, It's a Mad World has Spencer Tracy in addition to the comedy stars.
Right.
But most of these British ones, it's just some like music hall guy you've never heard of, or and a special appearance by Peter Ustinov or something. And you're like, whoa, now we're talking. 1964 Best Supporting Actor winner Peter Ustinov? Yes, please. We received email at theomnibusproject@gmail.com. And for physical artifacts that do not fit in your email, cram them in as you might, you could use the U.S. Postal Service to send them to us at the Omnibus Project, P.O. Box 55744, Shoreline, Washington, 98155.
Futurelings, from our vantage point in your distant past, we have no idea how long our civilization survived.
You seem bummed about that today. Usually we're quite perky about it.
Yeah.
But when you think about it, bit of a downer conceit for a podcast.
I do feel like it's just now dawning on me that we are just the trapper keeper for ephemera that's like probably spent 1,000 years floating on the bleach ocean.
We'll inscribe all this in a golden trapper keeper and snap it shut.
Yeah.
Leave it under 10 feet of permafrost in Svalbard.
Look for the record with us on the cover. We hope and pray that the catastrophe we fear may never come. If the worst comes soon, this recording, like all our recordings, may be our final word. But if Providence allows, we hope to be back with you soon for another entry in the Omnibus.
For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.